Mr Speaker.
Order. Order. Gareth Hughes.
Kia ora, Mr Speaker. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou kia ora. I'd like to start off by paying tribute to my departing colleague Kevin Haig. Last night in his final speech he talked about the worthy issues which unfortunately will be ignored by this government over the last 8 years, the frustration of the partisan political response. We've watched this lot this season for 8 seasons and I want to go in this contribution and ask what's the government's story? Now, I agree with Kevin's sentiment. They've been a government that's only taken a token response to the tough questions. They've been a bare minimum government. You only have to look at the announcement they've made to look into it. Take 50 by 2050, which is their greenhouse gas target. It's a snappy slogan, sure, never mind the science, but the fact is all the government policies are actually increasing emissions and pollution, not reducing it. Take pest-free Aotearoa by 2050. Great. It's pretty hard to find anyone in this country who's opposed to that. But then they don't fund it to meet the target and they go off and have photo ops with a bunch of Kiwis. Take electric vehicles, another area where it's great to see attention. It's an area where we've got an issue that takes more dollars and cents than almost anywhere else on the planet. However, Simon Bridges decides to set a target which is less than his officials' do-nothing scenario, and then he does nothing. Simon Bridges has launched that one 8 times. They've set so many empty targets across the 8 years. You've got to wonder, does the National Party actually have internal KPIs, internal meetings to come up with setting those empty targets? It's government by meme, government by slogan, government by focus group. A government who cares more about looking like acting than actually acting. You've got to give them credit though, they're pretty good performance actors. It's damaging because the country faces huge challenges and we need action, not a bunch of actors. But instead, when we do get the substance, what we see is the government selling things off or passing them on to their corporate mates. They sold our power companies and they're selling our farms. They sold out on the TPPA. They sold out on charter schools. And in the midst of a housing crisis, they're selling out the state houses. Now, once upon a time, there was a great Prime Minister in this country who was immortalised carrying in the dining table to help a family move into their first state house. In contrast, Key, who grew up in a state house, the supposed character from Central Casting, is the one putting a for sale sign out front. Now, something important I want to touch on. Key is the government's best actor in that lot. He's going to contest the next election, but I want to ask, will he continue the role if, by chance, he scrapes through on another one-seat majority into a 5th term? I doubt he's going to continue into that role. So the question for voters is, who's going to be picking the next Prime Minister? Is it going to be the bunch over there, the extras on the back bench? We've seen it in Australia in 2010, 2013, 2015. We saw it in Britain this year. Who's going to be picking the next Prime Minister? Is it going to be the national backbench extras or the people of New Zealand directly? Now, the government's plan, of course, is to ignore the pressing issues, ignore swimmable rivers, ignore inequality, ignore homelessness. It must be hard writing a script to avoid the issues every week. But luckily, Nook Karako, he stepped up with an adventure story how to rescue bags from airports. And his legislative cameo, Matt Ducey's taking up parliamentary time with a story about how we can email instead of writing letters to shareholders to see if they want a hard copy of the form. But what we know is that we sometimes see the incompetence behind the bad acting. Take Nick Smith. This guy's got the reverse Midas touch. Everything he touches turns to dust. He announced grand plans to release land, but forgot to mention he was talking about cemeteries and substations. There's measures, there's policies, there's initiatives, but not houses being built. This is the minister who took something which the vast majority of New Zealanders support, including many iwi, the Kermadec Sanctuary, and somehow managed to turn it into a Treaty of Waitangi breach and a threat to government stability. Can I suggest, as he considers retirement, that he considers, and I please ask this, a position in the coaching team of the Wallabies? Now then we've got the invisible Minister for Women's Affairs doing her worst impersonation of an out-of-date stereotype, which is to be seen but not heard. Mr. Speaker, it's time for New Zealand to have a conversation about not action, not acting, but action. It's time for solutions. It's time for a positive vision. It's time for less of this focus on treating New Zealanders as viewers. It's time to treat New Zealanders as informed citizens, give them the information, show the leadership, take the tough calls. It's time for a new chapter.